Happy Friday, Chagrin Falls. This is an important week for our school district, as Wednesday night we rolled out recommendations regarding the next phase of learning here at Chagrin Falls Schools. This has been a very trying time for everyone, both personally at home and at the school district, but I think we have things to celebrate. If you look at the district dashboard and the data that we monitor throughout the beginning of the school year, there's a lot to be celebrated in terms of how our students are behaving and the things that they're doing in school. The result of this data is on our district dashboard. It's on the main page. You can actually click into it and you can see the subcategories that we're following each week. So we've had 3 cumulative cases with our students and 1 cumulative case with our staff. We've also followed the state advisory system, and unfortunately yesterday, as Governor DeWine announced, there's a spread going on throughout the communities. We will continue to monitor this data, as we committed to you. This will drive the next phase of schooling. I think it's important to recognize that each week I sit on conference calls with health directors from both Cuyahoga and Geauga County. We did have an opportunity to talk to them this week regarding the increase in shifting of colors in the advisory system. And it was stated to us that this is the first time that Geauga County is in the 3rd level, that level of red, of the Ohio Public Advisory System. We've triggered 5 of 7 indicators in that county. We have not triggered those that measured regional healthcare capacity for our area. However, we have seen a significant increase in COVID-19. This is the case across the state as well. According to the health department, they do not believe at this time that increase is associated with the return to school or to classrooms, and they are not recommending changes to the in-school learning plans at this point. That was what we heard from Geauga County. What we heard from Cuyahoga County this week was that on a call with local superintendents was they outlined current conditions and indicated that to date the rise in incidence is occurring mainly through community spread and gatherings outside of schools. School and classroom exposures continue to account for a small portion of the total cases of COVID-19. This is likely due to all the precautions that our students and our staff are taking every single day, things like mask and spacing. They went on to explain that although overall county guidance remains the same under red, they stated that some school districts have the resources and plans in place to implement and sustain the necessary prevention protocols and mitigation strategies to open for all students. So I think it's really important to understand that although we are seeing increases, those are not happening in our schools. In fact, it pushed the health department, as I've been talking to local superintendents and asking, is there any examples of student-to-student spread, student-to-teacher spread, or teacher-to-student spread? And no one could identify a case that fell into those categories. Although the dashboard is really driving where we go in terms of a return to school, we also take a look at additional data, and we can learn from others as some schools surrounding us have returned with full-day students. So we've talked to representatives from Orange and Beechwood and Solon, Mayfield, West G, and even Laurel to look at their cases. And I think across the board you're seeing fairly low case counts. You're seeing it consistently with high school, maybe a few middle school students. Our elementary students are not seeming to contract this disease. Now, it doesn't mean that this isn't there. There's certainly asymptomatic, young people walking around. But by and large, this has been a real issue at high schools, and even positive cases seem to remain very, very low. In that, we've also learned a little bit with our experiences here. The biggest challenge with the secondary cases isn't really the case count in terms of COVID. It really boils down to the requirements when we have to contact trace. So the requirements basically say if you've been within 6 feet for 10 cumulative minutes of a positive case, whether that be a student or a staff member, those people can be quarantined. This has been a real challenge for districts that are all in, where they've had to quarantine hundreds of students at a time. So that all really plays into our recommendations that we'll talk about here at the secondary level. But let me start with the elementary level. At this point, I'm recommending a return to students K-6 to full day, everyday model at the conclusion of the trimester, which is November 17th. This provides a natural break for our teachers and our staff and an opportunity to bring all of our students forward and into this model. There's a lot of pros and cons to every decision we make under this pandemic. Some of the pros in terms of the elementary recommendation is this really provides 3 more weeks for us to watch data. So we're giving a long runway to continue to monitor data. And if there's substantial change or we see cases actually happening in our school district, we will have to make the decision to freeze and pause and stay in our hybrid model. We're also able to retain current safety protocols, including masking, temperature checking, assigned seating, limiting transitions between students. Certainly at the intermediate school, we have a lot more space. We have those large gathering collaborative spaces where we will push out larger classrooms to ensure that we have social distancing within there. Obviously, Gurney is a little more challenging, and I would not be forthcoming if the idea of 6 feet everywhere was going to happen, because that's just not the case. We've set a 3-foot social distancing minimum, which is the American Pediatric recommendation, and we've also implemented things to start to spread students out. This will allow for our full curriculum implementation in all subject areas, increase in instructional time in both math and reading, and really increase the availability of our staff to provide interventions to our at-risk students. Now, some of the cons is that I've already discussed: limits the social distancing to under 6 feet in some examples. Some transportation routes will have to allow for 2 students per seat, with priority given to families with students transporting together. And obviously, although we have not seen elementary cases, if we were, it probably expands the quarantine implication. We encourage those of you who signed up for using transportation to come to school, district transportation, to please do so, because as you know, if you've dropped off at Gurney or at the intermediate school, it can be quite challenging. And obviously a con would be, with all students back, we're going to have increased PPE expenditures, as we want to make sure everyone is taken care of and safe. From the secondary perspective, the recommendation is to modify the 7-12 schedule on November 9th to alleviate schedule concerns and align with an anticipated full-day return. So what this is really a step forward in terms of preparing for a full-day return. This will be the schedule that is implemented throughout the remainder of the year, regardless of the model that we end up in. This will return 7-12 students for a full day after the completion of the first semester, which is January 4th. So we're going to make a schedule change on November 9th, alleviating some issues I'll talk about here in a minute. And then we're going to stay in that hybrid situation and hopefully bring all students back at the end of the semester. Again, a very nice academic break for our students. We will transition Chagrin Falls Virtual Academy students in this model as soon as possible. And I didn't mention with the elementary, those students would be transitioned, if they want to come back into school, they would be transitioned at the trimester as well. So in terms of the secondary pros, we can retain current safety measures. We do not put ourselves at risk with that quarantining issue. We've got students participating in clubs, activities, and sports, and we want to provide and continue to implement those programs, and this gives us the best chance to keep everybody involved as much as possible, even with an active case on the 7-12 campus. We're going to move the 7-12 schedule to support that full-day return. And it really solves a big issue we've had. We've got 40 students in our Excel career technical programs. Those students on our current hybrid model miss half of their instruction every week. This change allows for that to allows that to be alleviated. So those students are taken care of. It brings more consistency, continuity, and regular instruction for all of those students. And across the board, it was determined that the length of time during our lunch break is just not enough for a transition. So this schedule will provide a little bit more time for our students to go home if they so choose, to do that lunch transition. They can eat before they have to hop back on for their afternoon classes. And it also lengthens the instructional time for virtual students on Fridays. So one of the things we've heard from staff is that 35 minutes just isn't enough. So this will take it to about 45 minutes, and also retains the block schedule. Again, staff feedback. By the time you get everybody in, you've got students virtually, you've got students in your classroom, take attendance, that takes almost 8 to 10 minutes of the period. So we want to give them those longer blocks of times instructionally. With everything we do, there's cons as well. This does not provide the full day option that some would like right now. That will not happen until the end of the semester. It really forces a change in our schedule, which I'll explain in a minute. So there is an element of disruption for our students and staff as they transition to a new schedule. And this will remain challenging for our staff, because regardless, even when we get to all in, they will still have students in Chagrin Falls Virtual Academy, which they will have to continue to balance students in the room and at home. And I commend our staff for everything they've done to make that happen. So the biggest change in the schedule for our students, instead of bringing Cuyahoga students in the morning and jog in the afternoon, That is going to change. There will be 2 mornings a week in which students are in based on their county, and there'll be 2 afternoons a week that students will be in based on their county. That really is due to the fact that we need to keep the morning periods in the morning, and this really solves and is driven by that Excel Tech issue that I discussed. The other significant change is the middle school will go to an all virtual schedule on Fridays as well. So there'll be the 4 block days in school, and 712 students will be virtual on Fridays, and again with that 45-minute instructional period online. So again, just to review the timeline, November 9th, we're going to implement the new 712 schedule. November 17th, we'll have a full day return for our K-6 students, and then January 21st, assuming data is in place, we'll return all of our high school students and middle school students 712 to our campus. And again, they will stay with the same schedule that we transitioned to back on November 9th. Important to note here, this is all data driven. We've committed that the dashboard will drive our decisions. We're going to continue to monitor data. If the spread that we're seeing right now continues and it starts to show up in our schools, that's going to force us to pause and stay in hybrid, and unfortunately, if it gets really bad, maybe potentially push us to remote. I think it's really important now, more than ever, with Halloween coming up, Thanksgiving, and the holiday season, to really think about what has led to us for us to be able to take this next step. We are all interconnected. We can't just do one thing in the school and another thing in the community and expect things to be okay. I really liked what Governor DeWine said in his press conference on Thursday. He said, think about something that clearly is at stake. That is whether our kids can be in school. That is really something that is at stake with all of this. That depends upon what we are willing to do. Our willingness to wear a mask, our willingness to keep a distance, our willingness to avoid gatherings where it might be a spread. And if we are at gatherings, wear a mask and be careful. Because we do truly control the spread within our community. The spread in the community really determines what is going on in our schools. That really says everything. This continues to be a community effort. Everyone is starting to tire of these measures, and I strongly encourage you to continue to implement. Use this as a time to kind of double down at that, reinforce it at home, reinforce it in the community, so we can get to a point where all of our students are back and bringing a greater sense of normalcy. I'll end with a thank you to everyone for their continued support. This is a difficult transition, I understand, but is a transition that will improve things for our students, and we continue to appreciate all that you do from a student and parent perspective. Have a great weekend.